Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime. Thanks so much for joining us here in New York City. You're watching Arise News Weekend, where you'll get deeper insight into stories making headlines all around the world. In this half hour, child suicide bombers. It is the latest attack by the militant group Boko Haram. Plus, unity in Paris as world leaders come together to show their support after deadly terror attacks. And the Pope baptizes bundles of babies. We have those stories and much more straight ahead. Thanks so much for joining us. Our top story at this hour: in Nigeria, 2 suicide bombers are believed to have killed dozens of people in a crowded place. Both of these bombers were children. It is believed that the bombers were sent into the marketplace by the militant extremist group Boko Haram. Dozens were killed and dozens more were injured. It is not known if the 2 bombers were part of a mass group of schoolgirls kidnapped by the group in April. The attacks come after militants, as also believed to be from Boko Haram, stormed the town of Baga this week. It is believed that at least 2,000 children, women, and elderly were all killed in a massacre. Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan called on Nigerians, especially young people, to still move forward.
Nigeria must move forward. Nigeria is for the youth. Nigeria is not for old people like us. The youth must redefine this country. The young generation must redefine this country. We must take this country to where we want to go. Nobody can push us backward. The past is past.
One of those bombers allegedly a 10-year-old girl. Still more terror now from suicide bombers, this time in Libya. At least 7 were killed when the bomber attacked a cafe. A sect from Al-Qaeda is claiming responsibility for that attack and say it was revenge for Sunni deaths in Syria and in Lebanon. On to news out of Europe now. Paris united. An enormous rally filled the streets of the French city today to show unity and support after a series of deadly terror attacks this week. World leaders from all across the globe joined French President Francois Hollande to march through the streets. About 1.5 million people joined them, and about 3 million or more were in rallies of solidarity all around France. President Obama, however, was not in attendance. However, Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas were at the march. The situation still remains tense, though, as police have been told to stay off social media and keep their weapons with them at all times in case of more attacks from sleeper terrorist cells. Arise News correspondent Sarah Firth is in the French capital with a roundup of today's events.
Well, huge crowds have taken to the streets today, Francesca, to take part in this unity rally here in Paris. And what a show of unity it's been. You've had all different age groups, all different nationalities. You can see in the crowds flags from so many different countries. You can hear the crowds as well. They've been singing and chanting. This has really been a day for the people to take to the streets in the wake of this tragedy and show that they're not afraid. That's been one of the banners that we've seen countless times here, and that they are going to stand united against this. Let's actually try and speak to some of the people in the crowd here. Hi there, can you tell us why you've come along today?
Just to show some solidarity and the importance, I think, today that we are all gathered here for one cause: is freedom of speech and solidarity against terrorism, extremism.
Freedom of expression is so much a part of the French culture. Do you think that there's fear, though, too, in the wake of what's happened, what's taken place?
Yeah, of course. This feeling here in France is we can sense it very much, and I think that the gathering here is so massive. There's so many people here from everywhere in the world that it shows that it's a great solidarity and it's this feeling that we have to fight for this freedom. That's the most important thing in the world. So that's why we can see that so many people come here.
Thank you very much for that. It really has been what today is all about. Of course, a great deal of sadness at the 17 French people who lost their lives, and the police ending that by killing the 3 gunmen. It was a very bloody end to what was the biggest terror attacks in France for many decades.
Thanks, Sarah. We're going to hear more from Sarah after the break, and you're watching Arise News Weekend.
The best way to predict the future is to create it.
There's a special breed of achievers out there that are called tomorrow's people, the highly creative ones who live in the future. They imagine what will be and strive to make it happen. They are bold. They refuse to wait for the future. Tomorrow bends and conforms to their ideas. At Access Bank, we share the same sentiments. We've been able to grow our bank to become a leading player in Nigeria with a strong presence across the continent, adopting best practice in everything we do. Our mantra for success is simple: speed, service, and security. Those who shape tomorrow, strive for, and demand perfection. At Access Bank, our service culture of speedy response and drive for excellence is the blueprint for creating customer experiences that will echo for generations. Come, let's work together and take tomorrow.
I believe that people are watching news less today, definitely. I think that more so people are going online to catch their news.
We've numbed the human mind to murders and all these bad things. The content is a constant loop of the same stuff. So there needs to be, new content all the time.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise News Weekend. I'm Francesca Maxime. Well, we have more coverage now on today's Unity March. There were sister marches in cities all around the world, including some right here in the U.S., the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and even in Boston. Some of the people that you did not see at today's rally, though, include U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who apparently had a previously scheduled meeting with India's Narendra Modi. You didn't even see Vice President Joe Biden either. Instead, the U.S. sent the ambassador to France, Jane Hartley, and the leaders of Canada and Australia were also absent. Well, now let's return back to Arise News correspondent Sarah Firth, who is in the French capital covering today's march, and she looks closer at the reaction from world leaders who participated in the event.
Now, I'm joined by Paul Martin, who is an international affairs expert. The world leaders have gathered today and actually standing shoulder to shoulder, people you wouldn't necessarily expect. But what can actually come of this? What can we expect them to do?
Well, I think they're going to tighten up on the regulations, particularly for preachers who are influencing young people, making them feel that they should be going out to far-flung lands to be trained to fight and to kill themselves if necessary, and then being imported back, like it seems to have happened here in Paris. I think there'll be strengthening of that. There'll be also greater money spent on monitoring and trying to get in to prevent the stuff at an earlier stage. The question of what's going to happen in the Middle East, though, is also very interesting. How much influence is the fact that 3.5 million people in France gathered today going to have on people who are already hell-bent on terrorism? And my answer to that, I'm afraid, is not very much influence. I think this demonstration is going to have a big influence on the way Western policy is carried out, but it's not going to have much influence on those purveying this terrorist art.
And I know we were speaking earlier, you were telling me about one banner in particular that had caught your eye in the crowd, playing into this issue about religious divides and concern perhaps that what's happened, what's taken place could make tensions between the communities, and there's often, very fragile community relations that go on, certainly in a place like France that's so diverse. Can you tell us a bit more about that banner and explain why it was so important?
Yes, well, of course, we've had this tremendous tension between in this case, Muslims and Jewish groups. 4 of the Jews were killed shopping for the Sabbath, and although Christians were attacked, they weren't attacked as Christians as such. But there is that tension. There's going to be an increase in right-wing feeling. And I love this banner, which I saw several people carrying, coexistence. The C was the crescent of the crescent moon that is part of Islam. And the T of coexistence was a Christianity, and the O, I think which letter it was, had the Star of David portrayed. So you had all 3 religions in the word coexistence. And I think this is the key to securing our future.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Paul Martin, expert in international affairs. And you really did see all those crowds taking to the streets, not just here in Paris, but all across France and indeed across the international community. You've had solidarity gatherings. Now here tonight it's gotten a bit quieter, but I'm sure you can see behind me a very visible security presence. That's really been a focus in ensuring that this unity march went off safely. And of course, this issue of security, that is going to be at the forefront of minds in the coming weeks and months. It would be what was discussed today between world leaders, and there are of course going to be some very tough questions to be asked of the French police and the French security services. The three gunmen involved, the two Kouachi brothers, who carried out, it's thought, that attack on the Charlie Hebdo offices, shot by gunmen, and Amedy Coulibaly, who carried out the supermarket siege, also shot by gunmen. Those men were known to the security services. They were on a US and European watch list. The question is going to be asked and need to be answered as to how they were able to slip through the net. We've heard from the French President, Francois Hollande. He said repeatedly that this is an international problem. And today you saw the international community coming together to deal with that. But certainly being out amongst the crowds today, talking to people throughout the day, of course, a deep sense of sadness at what's taken place, but everyone really wanting to show today that they're not going to let this make them live in fear. They're not going to be cowed by this. They wanted to put up this defiant front, and I think they've certainly done that. It's thought possibly more than 1 million here on the streets of Paris joining in that unity march, but as I said, this taking place all across France and indeed around the world today. And I think maybe steps today, the first steps taken towards healing what has been undoubtedly one of the worst tragedies France has seen for many decades. Back to you, Francesca.
All right, Sarah Firth, thank you so much for that report. While the terror does continue in the wake of the massacre at the Charlie Hebdo offices, 2 suspects are now accused of an arson attack on a Hamburg, Germany newspaper, which had reprinted the very same cartoons which were printed by the French newspaper. Jillian Kitchener has more on that.
2 suspects have been arrested after an arson attack on a Hamburg newspaper, which printed cartoons from the French satirical newspaper Charlie Hebdo. The incident is under investigation to determine if the blaze at the Hamburger Morgenpost was set in retaliation for printing the contentious cartoons. A dozen people were killed in France during an attack on Charlie Hebdo Wednesday, the gunmen furious over the newspaper's depictions of the Prophet Muhammad. 5 others were killed over 3 days of subsequent violence, and the nation is mourning. World leaders are arriving in Paris for a silent unity march. They'll join Muslim representatives and hundreds of thousands of French citizens, coming together to send a message of strength instead of fear.
While President Obama does say that he is looking to prevent more violent extremism, Obama will host allies at the White House on February 18th for a security summit. It is not known which leaders will attend, but the French minister says his counterparts across Europe have agreed to boost cooperation to stop further attacks. Still to come, a look at the Consumer Electronics Show and the upcoming Detroit Car Show. You're watching Arise News Weekend.
If I was to build my own news network, I would love a correspondent in every country, every location, every city.
Shahana Bhatt, Arise News, New Delhi.
Karim Gamaluddin, Arise News, Cairo.
Dale McEwen, Arise News, Karagosk.
James Blue, Arise News, Addis Ababa.
Ronnie Curvello, Arise News, São Paulo, Brazil.
We give them different angles on stories so they can get a different perspective of the people that they are looking at.
It's hard to pin down the exact number of Syrian refugees who have streamed across the border into Lebanon.
They stormed a media room in one of the hotels in Kuala Lumpur, holding placards reading, "Tell us the truth and return our families back to us."
Anchors and reporters that have covered wars, have covered disasters, have covered government shutdowns. There's nothing almost that this team hasn't experienced.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
I have never worked for a news organization like Arise News. The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in. In this news organization, everybody's opinion counts. There is no big I's and little U's. Every angle, every perspective matters, and that's freeing in so many ways.
Welcome back to Arise News Weekend. We have a little lighter news for you as the year kicks off. The business is abuzz with trade shows galore. And earlier I checked in with somebody who's going to bring us up to speed on everything. Well, it's a great time of year for trade shows with the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas introducing us to new tech gadgets, apps, and more that we're going to want to be using throughout the year, while the Detroit Auto Show is showing us all the fun, the things that we can and could soon be driving. Joining us via Skype from Buffalo is Lauren Fix from the Car Coach and Car Smarts, and also a juror for the North American Car and Truck of the Year. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. It's a very exciting time of year. It's always very busy.
Well, what gadget struck you the most at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas?
Well, I'm a smartphone person, and I happen to have an Apple iPhone, but it's funny, Apple does not set up at the Consumer Electronics Show, but they're still the talk of the show. Everybody's building accessories for the new iWatch that's coming out, and of course the current iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. So there's a lot of really unique technology, shall we say. Part of also what you're seeing is huge, where it's 3D printers. Now, we've seen some really cool stuff made on 3D printers, including some things that actually help disabled people, which is really great to use some technology for a positive purpose rather than just, to make a toy.
Sure.
But from an automotive standpoint, used to be, who's going to set up there from the automotive industry? But now there's so much automotive. One of the keynote speakers was Dieter Zetsche, who is from Mercedes, and they brought an autonomous car that looks like a living room with comfortable seating and, of course, a table in the middle. And it was sort of weird to look at it when you realize the driver has their back to the roadway. But that's I'm not ready for that, but I think we're looking at maybe 10 years down the road, we're 5 to 10 years, where you're going to start seeing autonomous cars, and we're already seeing some of that technology now.
Yeah, I know the Google car, when I saw that, I was like, what is this about? All right, well, from cars to apps, what are some of the ones that people are going to watch out for? And I also heard that CES had this thing called Sling by the Dish Network that might be a great alternative to getting ESPN and stuff without cable.
Right. Now, you may have heard of a Sling box, and I actually have one. You connect it through your cable network at home, and when you're on the road, you pick up your smartphone, you pay for the app, and you're able to use what's called Sling Box. Now, anyone can use that now, but the Sling app that's included with the Dish Network means you pay an extra fee, and you'll have the ability to see those same shows, whatever's on your dish at home, on your phone or your iPad or your smart device. Pretty cool technology, but they're claiming that their streaming is even better than what Slingbox offers, but it's really only as good as the signal that you're taking in, just like anything.
Okay. All right, back to cars. Detroit Auto Show, obviously, are we still sort of trying to go green? Are we looking for some really funky designs? What struck your fancy?
It's funny. Everyone thinks it would be a go green type of thing, and electric vehicles, which sales are up on electric vehicles, and the number one selling vehicle is the Nissan Leaf. But believe it or not, that is not what it's all about. Diesel vehicles, huge diesel vehicles, up 13 to 14% right now. And right now we hear rumor, and I will know this by Monday morning, that Jaguar and Land Rover are bringing in diesel-powered vehicles. That means they're going head-to-head with the Germans. That will bring some more excitement to the industry. Also, big horsepower. I mean, we just had the 707 horsepower Hellcat, which is a Dodge Charger or a Challenger with a big SRT Hemi engine in it. Of course, we got the Corvette. Mustang is going to have a GT350R if you're into the old Mustangs, the old Shelbys. So they're trying to, I know it's where you really have to be a car person. So it's either big performance or it's going to be diesel. And hybrid is just not there. They're just fuel-efficient cars are the norm.
I guess those low oil prices and low gas prices are driving us back to the bigger cars. Who knows? Lauren Fix,
you never know.
We're going to have to leave it there. But thanks so much for joining us on Arise News Weekend.
Thank you.
Well, still ahead, Pope Francis in a baby baptizing bonanza. You're watching Arise News Weekend.
I think media and reporters have a lot to answer for.
AIDS, hunger, people not having running water, the things that we just take for granted.
I think the most important issues in the world today are education and poverty.
Terrorism and war, I guess, is always. It's always an issue, and the quality of life of certain groups of people in certain areas.
I think inequality.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
One of the great things about Arise Entertainment 360 is we have this Arise to Your Health segment, which really focuses on the holistic approach of being healthy. So we do everything from working out to juicing to getting in shape by doing fun exercises like bouncing on a trampoline or wearing these bouncy boots on our feet when we're jumping all over the set. We've done karate, we've danced the weight off, we've done just about everything. And of course, I love when we eat on set, but we do it in a very healthy and clean way.
Welcome back. Well, Sri Lanka is preparing for a special guest, that being Pope Francis. Julian O'Shea has more on his visit this week.
Parishioners at St. Mary's Church in Colombo are getting ready for a special guest. Pope Francis starts his 3-day visit to Sri Lanka this Tuesday, much to the delight of some of the country's 7 million Catholics.
It's great because, I think he's a living saint, and we are looking forward to see him because we have seen him all over the world, but to see him personally in Sri Lanka is the greatest gift that God has given us.
Vatican officials hope the trip will help bridge the gaps between some of the different ethnic communities here. Pope Francis is expected to canonize Joseph Vaz as the first saint of Sri Lanka during his visit. Hundreds of thousands are expected to attend the event. This is the Pope's second trip to Asia in the past 6 months. He heads to the Philippines next.
Well, in Vatican City, it was a baptizing bonanza as Pope Francis baptized 33 babies in the Sistine Chapel this morning. That was 13 boys and 20 girls, including a set of twins. All the kids are the children of Vatican employees. Pope Francis announced each child's name as he welcomed them to the faith. And the annual tradition marks the end of the Christmas season since it's held the first Sunday after the January 6th Epiphany. Well, Pope Francis, of course, has been everywhere in 2014, making bold statements and affecting policy, as well as his own legacy. So with a look at what he's done and what's still to come in 2015, I sat down a little earlier with Father Matt Malone. He's the president and editor-in-chief of America Magazine. Pope Francis is such a departure from Benedict, Pope Emeritus. Talk to me about why Pope Francis was chosen and what he's really done to sort of reinvigorate the church.
Well, I think what was pretty clear was that the church faced enormous challenges, and in the wake of Pope Benedict's resignation. We were dealing with the follow-up from the sexual abuse crisis here in the United States and elsewhere. We had a crisis of governance at the very heart of the church, in the bureaucracy of the church, and there was kind of a crisis of confidence in a rapidly secularizing West. And so those were three enormous challenges, and they had to find, I think, somebody who could go outside the usual way of doing things to find a way to address those huge challenges.
I mean, because he's the first pope who has been elected as pope that hasn't been in thousands of years from Western Europe. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
And so that in and
and
of
the first
itself,
from the New World. Right.
And the New World. And also I heard he was a former nightclub bouncer at one point. So he's not just your regular pope, right?
He was, exactly, yeah.
What would you say are some of his major accomplishments in 2014? We know he worked on things like Cuba, same-sex marriage, and he recently appointed some new cardinals for developing areas.
Yeah, he did. Well, there are three areas I think that we can really point to as being emblematic of his work in 2014 that give us some indication of what he'll do in the year ahead. The first is just within the bureaucracy of the Vatican itself, he has set about reforming it. And he has started to clean house. And that was the very first priority. The second is he has addressed the larger church through, in a more pastoral, a more personal, a more heartfelt way through events like the Synod on the Family, where we have seen progress and a welcome that we have not seen in years. And thirdly, he's engaged with the wider world, and most notably in helping to affect this changed relationship with Cuba and the United States.
Right, and we know that he's also got climate change on the agenda right now in Asia. Talk to me about that, and also what his plans there are, and potentially with bringing a greater role to women in the church, perhaps?
Sure. Well, he has a commitment as Pope to environmental science and to safety and to reversing the devastating effect of climate change. In part because, we're people of the creation, and we value creation. We're stewards of creation. That's a charge we've been given by God. But also he knows that those who are most adversely affected by it are the world's poorest folks, the world's poorest citizens. And, the poverty and those folks has been a constant theme of this pontificate so far, and will continue to be. I mean, that is his great passion. And I think, he has called for a deeper theology of women in the church, and it'll be interesting to see where that will go in 2015. The Vatican has just released its report on the visitation of religious sisters here in the United States. It took a very different tact than people thought that it would take. It was very positive. It really lifted people up. It celebrated the lives of these women, their dedication to the church, their dedication to one another, their dedication to their communities. And even Cardinal O'Malley of Boston, who is the Pope's most trusted American advisor, said that the Vatican investigation of women religious had been a disaster.
Yeah.
And so there's some cleanup and some healing to take place there.
Some hope for the nuns on the bus.
Yes.
And finally, when we talk about the cleaning of the coffers and trying to get the financial house in order, a lot of that seems to have been what put off folks, as in addition to the pre-sex abuse cases and things like that seem to be progressing. Talk to me about how he's going to make sure that the Vatican stays clean after he's gone.
Well, I think one thing is you're right, the kind of corruption it's the kind of corruption that enrages us no matter where we are and what part of life we are. And he's found it there in spades. And he's going to do a couple of things. One, he has really empowered this new forum, the Secretariat for the Economy, that is charged with streamlining things, putting in place safeguards and ethical protocols. He has been moving people out of the bureaucracy, and I think we're going to see him move more people in, and he's going to require that fewer of those people actually be clerics.
Okay.
Right. So I think we'll see more lay professionals and women in positions of influence in the Vatican.
And perhaps that will bring more people to the church, which I think is probably ultimately something he would like very much.
Yes, as a bouncer, he was interested in keeping people out. As Pope, he wants them to come in.
You can change with the times.
That's right.
Father Matt Malone, President and Editor-in-Chief of America Magazine, we really appreciate your time here on Arise News Weekend. Please come back anytime.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you. And you're watching Arise News Weekend.
Yeah. If I was building my own news network, I think I'd want broad, in-depth knowledge of important issues throughout the world.
I would want to recruit a fairly diverse staff that had different life experiences before they came to the news.
We want to see how we can help ourselves and help benefit other people, and not just see what's up with the celebrities and where they're going and traveling and buying this and buying that.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
President Barack Obama went to sub-Saharan Africa. We were the only station that covered it wall to wall. We, as the network, and the people that view our network, were the better for it.
Well, tonight, Hollywood goes to the Golden Globes. Comedians and actresses Tina Fey and Amy Poehler will host those awards, sponsored by the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. This is the third time the pair are going to be hosts. They also say it's going to be their last time. Fey and Poehler promise that topics like the sexual allegations against comedian Bill Cosby will not be off limits. Well, football fans usually have themselves plenty of snacks during the game, right? Maybe some chicken wings or something. But Packers fans at today's playoff game had the option of a colossal treat, a 3.5-pound hamburger called the Big Game Burger. Well, that's what was served up today. It is venison, bacon, and beef, topped with jalapeno cheese sauce, bacon, 6 tomatoes, lettuce, pickles, and secret sauce. It's baked in the oven for 25 minutes and then finished up on the grill. It costs $20, and by the way, the Packers beat the Cowboys today 26-21. That'll fill you up. All right, thanks so much for watching Arise News Weekend. I'm Francesca Maxime. Follow me on Twitter at Francesca Maxime, and we'll see you again next time.